how is it that how important is it to know what it is we're working with in order for it to survive and thrive in our garden? Okay. All right, so how is it then that everybody runs away from this topic of botany called plant taxonomy, classification of plants? It's like we're all allergic to it. And so what I'd like to do in the time I've got left, and it's about an hour and 10 minutes, and it's going to be impossible to do, but we're going to do it. Okay, talk to you about how plants are indeed classified and how by knowing that we can be better helping other people grow their plants. All right. All right. So when we talk about plant taxonomy and nomenclature, we're really talking about plant categories and names. Typically, plants are categorized based on biological, chemical, and anatomical similarities. So the key word for the rest of this morning is similar. What does it mean to be similar? And we all have our own definitions of what it means to be similar. Some people feel being identical is similar. Others say, well, you're both breathing, so you're similar. You see, so we want to help understand that botanists are people too. Remember that show, Kids Are People Too? They should have had one called Botanists Are People Too, because botanists are very quirky. Okay? In that the way they make decisions. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. Okay, plant nomenclature. The formal scientific naming of plants, identified rules for naming plants correctly. Key event occurred in 1753 when this dude named Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist, publishes a paper called Species Plantarum, and he introduces this naming system called the binomial system. It is the boom and the bane of horticulture. Today we have an international code of botanical nomenclature. Do you know we actually have a code? It's a book, right? And if you violate anything in the code, the plant police will come. Not. It's a set of rules and recommendations dealing with the formal botanical names that are given to plants. Look at this is important. Its intent is that each taxonomic group, taxon, plural taxa, of plants has only one correct name that is accepted, keyword, worldwide. This is a major problem, okay? Because it does not say this law, and therefore there's no enforcement of these rules. You have to embrace them. Biologists classify living things into 6 kingdoms now. When I was in high school, there were only 2, plants and animals. And then all of a sudden, some scientists got wild hairs and said, what about fungi? And somebody said, what about fungi? Okay. At NC State, the fungal specialist, the mycologist, is in the Department of Botany. So guess where fungi used to be classified? In the plant kingdom, right? Bacteria used to be classified in the animal kingdom. Now they have their own. Plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, protista, archaea, don't ask me. I can just show you the 6 kingdoms. Now, that's all fine and good, just merely as an introduction. We are focusing on the plant kingdom. It gets even more, oh, there's archaea. I forgot to show you that one. So within the kingdom of plants, there are 12 divisions. Holy smokes, this is headed back to, do I not need to know this for the exam? 12 divisions. Interestingly enough, as master gardener volunteers and as gardeners and as horticulturists, we only care about one of those 12. Just one. We don't have to worry about the other 11. Don't ask me about who the other 11 are. I couldn't tell you. Because I really don't care about the 11. I care about them because they're living things, but not from this class perspective. I don't care about the 11. So the one division we're working with is this thing called Tracheophyta. Some will say, oh, they're the seed-bearing plants, but that's incorrect, and you'll see why here in a second. Okay, these are plants that have a system for moving substances. Oh, that sounds familiar. Translocation. Okay, in other words, these are plants that have a vascular system. Plants with tubes, vascular. Okay, trachea, right? It's a tube, it's a channel, right? Plants with tubes. Now, humans don't have a vascular system. We have a what? We have a cardiovascular system. Cardio pump, vascular tubes. Humans have a pump tube system. Plants just have a tube system, all right? And these tubes are organized based on the kinds of materials that pass back and forth, which we talked about earlier, such that vascular plants, if you look at some of their parts, you can actually see evidence of their tubes. We call those veins in a leaf. All right. So that's Tracheophyta, right? And so when we look at, you know, our red buds and our dogwoods, there's that photo again. We can see that they are vascular in that their tubes are represented by things we call veins. All right. So division. Okay, we got division Tracheophyta. Now, Interestingly enough, the division Tracheophyta has 12 classes. What's with the 12? Okay, interesting. 12 classes. Okay, one of those classes is Gymnospermae. Gymnospermae. Boy, when I talk to third graders about this, they light up when they see the word Gymnospermae. Okay, I can remember when I was in third grade, if somebody said Gymnospermae, I didn't know anything, right? But today, third graders they know more than they need to know, and as a result, they get all giddy over spermae. Okay, then when they find out what gymno means, they all fall out of their chairs. Because gymno means naked. Yeah, naked seeds. Okay, these are plants that produce seeds in unique and interesting structures that expose their seeds to the world. Typically, all your cone-bearing plants are in the class Gymnospermae. All right, just under 700 different species of Gymnospermae. All right, and they include things like cycads, ginkgo, your conifers, your fir, your pine, your spruce. Okay? They're a very important part of horticultural life. If you think about all the different things, all the different types of trees that produce needles. We're really talking about needle-like trees. The cycads, well, the cycads were the biggest part of Gymnospermae during Jurassic times. Okay, they're more of an ancient part of Gymnospermae. But that's our Gymnospermae and the horticultural connection here. Pulp, paper, lumber, ornament, rosin, turpentine. These all come from gymnosperms. All right. Second class of the 12 under Tracheophyta are angiosperms. Still spermae, seeds, angio. What does that mean? That means enclosed. It's the opposite of naked. So we're talking about groups of plants that produce seeds that have some kind of fruit around them. They're the fruit-bearing plants. That's angiospermae, right? There are 250 plus different species of angiosperms in the world. 250,000. They are a much more predominant class of plants than gymnosperms, are they not? Sure, things that have broad leaves, fruit that enclose seeds, food, fiber, beverage, paper, oil, spices, shelter. From a geological perspective, which of the two classes is the oldest? Gymnosperm. Gymnosperms have been, ever since ancient times, gymnosperms have been decreasing slowly in number. Angiosperms have been expanding in number. Okay. However, it's interesting to note that the 700 species of gymnosperms seems to have flattened out. Third class, no seeds, spores. Felicinae, that's the third class. Ferns, no seeds, they reproduce by spores. Okay. Wait a minute, I forgot something. Yeah, there's about 15,000 different species of ferns. Isn't that interesting? Ferns, 15,000, gymnosperms, 700. Fascinating. All right. So far we got kingdom, Tracheophyta, we've got class, Gymnospermae, naked seeds, Angiospermae, fruited plants, Felicinae, ferns. So that's how far we've gotten so far. And what's really great about being a Master Gardener volunteer is, okay, you can walk into a garden center and say, I'm looking for some Felicinae, and you're not going to get any kind of response whatsoever. And you can tell gardeners, if you think you're done with plant classification, when you get to the class level, you're just getting started. This is just to develop an appreciation and a felt need, like we got to get more specific. No pun intended. So within Angiospermae, there are subclasses. All right, look at the subclass, Monocotyledonnae. Oh, these words. Monocotyledonnae. These are plants that are characterized by having one cotyledon. So those of you who don't know what a cotyledon is, inside a seed, it needs sugar. Well, what else would it need, right? A seed needs sugar to germinate, and the seed storage organ in a seed is a cotyledon. It's called a seed leaf. It's filled with sugar. And so monocots only have one seed leaf in the seed. All right, one. All right. Not only that, but their flower parts. If you look at a monocot, the flower parts are in multiples of 3, like an orchid or an iris. Okay, and their leaves all are characterized by having parallel venation. Okay? One of the cool things about plant ID is not figuring out what the plant is. It's figuring out what it isn't. Somebody comes to you you're in a booth, the Master Gardener, somebody comes to you with a plant and shoves it in your face. You can look at it and you can say, I can tell you what it's not. What isn't it? It's not a monocot. Why not? Look at the leaves. They're not parallel vein, they're reticulate venations branch. That means this is not a monocot. You have just eliminated a good portion of plants in angiospermae by identifying this as a non-monocot. I taught plant ID for 30 years. I taught my students, it's like, look, we're not trying to figure out what it is, we're trying to figure out what it isn't. And by figuring out what it isn't, then we have a much better idea of figuring out what it is. All right? 50,000 different species of monocots. Okay, grasses, palms, lilies, iris, orchids. You know, the largest family of plants in the whole world are the orchids. Yep, they're monocots. We good? Good. How about dicotyledonnae? 2 cotyledons. That's the second subclass. Dicotyledonnae. These are dicots. 2 seed leaves. That means you open up an acorn, you open it up and look inside. What do you see? 2 pieces. Those are both cotyledons. Dicots. Flower parts and multiples of 4 and 5. You math majors out there are already seeing a problem. Wow. Flower part. What if you see a flower with flower parts of 12? You better look at the leaves. Parallel or reticulate venation. Broadleaf plants with branching veins. Those are dicots. 200,000 different species. So they tend to be the predominant of the 2. But that doesn't mean grasses, orchids, lilies, that doesn't mean that that monocots aren't important horticulturally. Incredibly important. So it's important. You got trees, shrubs, fruit trees, many flowers, dicots. So right now you should be asking a question. Why is it important for me, a Master Gardener volunteer, future Master Gardener volunteer, why is it important for me to be able to tell the difference between a monocot and a dicot? Can you give me one horticultural reference? And I can. But before I do that, I'm going to show you beans, dicots, corn, monocot. Think of the leaves of the corn, parallel venation. Leaves of a bean, reticulate venation, branch. All right. I cut myself for you. That's a hickory nut. I cut it open. Two cotyledons on either side. Hickory is a dicot. Okay. Subclass, monocotyledonnae, 1 seed leaf, corn, 2 seed leaves, bean. Oh, there's some more pictures for you. And then there's your venation on the left, parallel on the right, reticulate. There's this stuff that you can buy and spray on your monocot patch. And it'll only kill dicots. Turfgrass is a monocot. Plantain, dandelion, and all other broad-leaved weeds, hear it, are dicots. So I don't want to say thanks to, but thanks to World War II and Vietnam War, scientists were able to create what we call a selective herbicide. And the selective herbicide we begun is selective for dicots and will not harm monocots. So to me, that's a good reason to know the difference. Because if I'm out spraying with Weed Be Gone, I better make sure that I'm only spraying where I want the dicots to die. How many people go out and spray Weed Be Gone on a windy day and wonder why their Japanese hollies are starting to turn yellow leaves 2 weeks later? That's just abuse and ignorance when it comes to using this material. All right. Then from subclass, we come down to order. This is where I start having fun. Order. Sapondalis. Okay. I don't even know what that means, but Sapondalis. Look who's in Sapondalis order. Maples, citrus, horse chestnuts, mango, cashew. How many of you would have put these 5 together if I said, show me a group of related plants that have some similarities? I would never have put who knew maples and citrus were kinfolk? Right? Maples, citrus, horse chestnuts, mango, and cashew. And from that order come families. So within these different areas, within Sapondalis, we have different families. Now I'm gonna make this claim, and I've made it all the years that I taught plant ID, and my students were not happy about it. But if you're going to be associated with horticulture in any way, shape, or form, you had better be embracing the family, the plant family, because that's where your ability to solve problems begins, and that's by understanding families, and I'll prove it to you. All right, family. Oh, let me give you the written definition. A group of closely related plants based on certain structures or on their biochemistry. You could even include genetics in there, okay? These are much more related plants. Seems kind of obvious, doesn't it? Family, Rosaceae. Family, who's in it? Roses, apples, pears, and strawberries. Who knew that strawberries and roses were related to each other to the degree that they're members of the same exact family? Why is that so important if you're a gardener? Every year I have a yearly physical. Every year I have to fill out like electronic pages and pages of family history, because that enables my doctor to better predict my health within the environment that I live. Okay, plants in the same family have similar susceptibilities and also have similar tolerances. That's why you don't plant your rose bushes near your apple trees, because the very things that roses are susceptible to will infect the apple trees and vice versa. Okay? So if we understand plants are in the same family, we can begin to understand where they're strong and where they're weak. All right? Fagaceae, oaks, beeches, and chestnuts, all in the same family. Okay? This gets very, very, very important to understand for lots of different reasons. And I want to tell you a true story. Anybody know what plant this is? Yeah, these are cashew fruit. They're little nuts right there. So I went to the University of Connecticut my first 2 years of college, and I lived in a dorm. And as a freshman, I became quite enamored with the upperclassmen who would do this thing called an all-nighter before an exam. I thought that was quite romantic. Stay up all night, you have an exam the next day, stay up all night, study, okay, and then go in and take the exam when you're just beat with a stick. Not that the old lady was there, but you know. So I thought, you know, I want to do one of those. But I was smart. I said, I want to do one with, I don't have an exam the next day. So I got 4 of my buddies together and I said, look, let's pull an all-nighter on a Friday night and we'll stay up all night, we'll play cards and we'll eat and we'll just have a good time. And then the next morning we can get up and go to bed. Okay. And then I can say I pulled an all-nighter, right? So we went out shopping for snacks. And back then they had these things called health food stores. Okay. I went to this health food store and I bought a big bag of cashews because I love cashews. Brought them back and all night long we played cards. I was eating cashews. Okay, next morning they all left. I had a racquetball date at 9 o'clock. So at 9 o'clock I got my gym clothes on and went over to the gym and I played racquetball with a good friend of mine. And then walking back, I noticed that my joints here, where skin met skin when you bend, like behind your knees, you know, under your arms, other areas, okay, a rash broke out. Oh, it was itchy and it swelled up. And by the time I got back to the dorm, I was walking like this. So all day Saturday I was miserable, couldn't figure out what was going on. I thought I'm very sick. So on Sunday, I went to the student health center. I went and saw a doctor, sat me down. And the first thing he said to me was, he looked and he said, where have you been? Okay. Now he's asking environmental questions. Where have you been? What have you done? I said, I haven't been anywhere. It's just been here at college. He goes, have you done anything different than you normally do? And I said, well, I pulled an all-nighter last night. He goes, you don't even have an exam today. I said, no, we just stayed up and we played cards. He goes, okay, so that was different. He goes, but that wouldn't cause the rash. He said, have you eaten anything or drank anything that's different than your normal routine? I said, well, yeah, I did eat some cashews. He goes, how many? I said, well, I bought a pound. And I think I ate about half of them. He said, bend over. Pulled out a big giant needle and gave me a steroid shot. And here's what he told me. He told me that cashew is a member of the order Sapindalis and in the family Anacardiaceae. Okay. Then he proceeded to tell me that poison ivy is in Sapindalis order and in the family Anacardiaceae. And he told me that unroasted cashews contain the same alkaloid chemical that is in poison ivy that causes that significant allergic reaction in a human being, if indeed they're sensitive. Guess who's sensitive? What? Mangoes as well. I have a granddaughter who can't eat mangoes because it makes her mouth all irritated. Okay. All right. If I had known, yeah, the shot does hurt. If I had known that these two were in the same family, I was just starting my horticultural education, but had I known, I might have avoided it. So I know that if I buy dry roasted cashews, I'm cool, because the dry roasting process destroys those chemicals in the raw cashew. And I can also tell you that it takes 8 raw cashews to just create a little bitty rash right back here. Because do you think I took what the doctor said as gospel? No, I had to test it. I'm a scientist. I had to test it. And so I started out by eating 3, nothing happened. I said, okay. Then I ate 4, 5, and when I hit 8, things started to happen. Okay. But the reason why I had the steroid shot was because I ate a half a pound. All right. So if we go back and we look at the ancestral green algae, we look at this family tree, so to speak, there's nothing on here I want you to remember as much as appreciate. Here we are looking at seedless non-vascular plants, seedless vascular plants. Then we come up here to gymnosperms, and then over on the right, angiosperms. Then there's monocot. We've got dicots over there. So we've got all these classification units that bring us down to the family level. So where we go from here as horticultural people is more than important than what we just went through. That what we went through is to appreciate and understand, because we're building a foundation, and I'm going to ask you to trust me. We have to continue digging deeper into this classification. I think this is exciting. I hope you do. And I want to know how you're feeling. And if I might be able to show you how I think you're feeling, I would say maybe like that. So what's in a name? Every name tells a story. All right. If we're going to be talking about nomenclature, right? There's my grandson, Lane. That's when he was 10. We took him to Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, because I wanted to explain to him about why the colors were so much more, but that's not why we took him. Okay. But there's Lane. He's now 17, applying to colleges. All right. But there's his name, Lane Scott Ivy. Right? So you say, Lane, what's your name story? Well, Lane turns out to be his mom's maiden name. So that made me faint when he was born, because, you know, I thought, I have 2 daughters, the Lane name's gone, and next thing you know, they say, well, his name's Lane. It's like, oh, how cool is that? All right. Scott is his uncle's name. Although my daughter and her husband say they did not name him after Uncle Scott, but they did not name him because of Uncle Scott. And then they chose to be traditional by giving him his paternal family name as the last. So his name tells a story. Right? Okay. There are some fascinating plant names out there. Touch me not. Where did they come up with that? That's what it looks like. Here's another one, sensitive plant. This is one where if you speak harshly, the plant, right? No, that's sensitive plant. Somehow when you touch it, it has hydraulic mechanisms in it where the leaves just kind of fold down. Resurrection fern, okay? There's resurrection fern when it's nice, moist and nice outside. When it's dry, turns brown, crumples up, looks dead, and when water comes back, it resurrects. Okay? Bloodroot. There's bloodroot. For years, I wondered, why the heck did they call that plant bloodroot? Because when you dig it up, the stems are red. The stems are red when you dig it up. The roots are not. Okay? It's just the stems are just underground for this plant. They're called rhizomes, underground stems, that somebody in their ignorance called roots and said, oh, that's bloodroot. Okay. Cheeseweed. Oh, well, you see that. There's cheeseweed. I have no idea why. Okay, naked ladies, we're not going there. No, there's a naked lady right there. Okay, notice that these are plants that are flowering right now, no leaves at all. Okay, but beautiful, beautiful flowers. Okay, when it comes to understanding the classification units within family, we need to start in Geneva, Switzerland. You need to pretend that you represent the United States of America for a botany conference where you are going to be asked to create the classification unit that's inside of family, okay? And you're at a committee meeting with a bunch of others. You're there for a week at Geneva, okay? As soon as you get the definition written, you can go on vacation, right? All right. So, by the way, that's where you're gonna vacate, right? This is where the meeting is, okay? And the term they give you to come up with a definition is genus. Say, we'd like for you to come up with a definition of genus. So the chair of the committee, through a translator, points at you and says, how do we start this definition? A genus is a group of plants. Look at this. A group of plants. Where's it located? Within a family. Some of you are standing up. Some of you think, hey, we're done. The group of plants within a family that are similar. Group of plants within a family that are similar. You know what? Everybody's clapping because you got 6 days free in Geneva, Switzerland. And then the chair of the committee says, wait a minute, we're all scientists here. You can't just come up with a new hypothesis and not test it. So she says, come on, everybody, let's go outside. So you all go outside and she says, here's the deal. I'm going to point at a plant, you look at it, I'm going to point at another plant, you look at it, and then you decide based on this definition whether they belong in the same genus or not. Fair enough? So you go outside, you walk out, just near the parking lot, you see this big, giant tree. By the way, in this pretend session, you do not take knowledge that you have and bring it with you. Okay? So don't be going, you can't do that. Or, oh, that's an oak. Don't do that. All right, so there's this big tree. And then right next to it, there's a smaller tree. This one's more oblong. Okay, there's that one. We look at the leaves of that one, big giant leaves with sinuses and rounded lobes. We look at leaves of these, they look like short pencils. Right, so the chair of the committee says, based on the vegetative characteristics that you have just looked at, the gross morphology of the plant and the leaves and the stems, raise your hand if you'd put it in the same genus. Very good, because that's exactly what happened. Nobody raised their hand. They say, oh no, they're in separate genera. Okay, one genus, multiple genera. So it's not in the same genus, right? Because, and I would totally agree, based on what you see, they're not similar enough to be in the same genus. Now, there was one scientist in the group that irritated the mud out of everybody. He was short, he talked a lot, and he said, wait a minute. And he ran over to this tree here on the right. Oh no, I can't remember which tree. I guess he ran over to this tree first. He asked someone to help him up, and into the top of the tree he went, and he came back down, and in his hand were the reproductive units of that tree. Well, I guess he went in the big tree first. And look at the reproductive units, big giant nuts with caps. And everybody looked at it and said, yeah, so what? Okay. And he said, wait a minute. He ran over here, climbed up into this tree, came out with these little tiny nuts with caps. These were smaller, they were more round, these were more oblong. The cotyledons in that were white. The cotyledons in here were orange. But would you deem these reproductive units similar? Yes. So now, based on the reproductive units of the plant, how many would put these two in the same genus? Okay, and so everyone went, darn, we got to go back and rewrite the definition. I wanted to start my vacation. Okay. So it only took 5 minutes to rewrite it. Group of plants within a family that have reproductive similarities, because plants' vegetative characteristics are not going to be reliable when it comes to determining if they're similar or not. Every plant in the genus of oaks, has the capacity to produce what? Acorns, right? Any plant that's in the genus of maples, you'll never see an acorn on a maple. You'll never see a double-winged samara on an oak, right? So genus is a much more closely related group of plants that may not vegetatively look much alike, but reproductively you go, oh yeah, they're related. Okay. So genus, genera, we've got oaks, maples, hollies, dogwoods. These are all common large genera that we are familiar with within the context of the southeast region of the United States. All right, but there is a dilemma there. You can't go into a garden center and ask for a maple. Actually, you can. And if you do, hi, I'm looking for a maple, what's typically the response you're going to get?
They're over there.
They're over there? Or how about, what kind? Well, what kind of maple are you looking for? So by virtue of the fact that we've got plants in groups that have similar reproductive units, genus, and yet they're even more similar below that, we have to get more specific, right? Okay. Because there's significant variation within the genus. So that brings us to species, and you're not going to get to go back to Switzerland. I'm just going to share the definition of species with you in the interest of time. First and foremost, it's a group of plants. A species is a group of plants. Where? Now they're within a genus that share similar vegetative and reproductive characteristics. Now we're talking about even greater similarity on both ends of the spectrum, reproduction and vegetation, right? What do these similarities do? They distinguish them, that group, make them different from all other plants in the same genus. So we've got this way more similar group, both reproductively and vegetatively, that are so alike that they separate themselves from all other plants that make acorns, for instance. That makes sense? This is going to put you right over the top. Plants in the same species easily reproduce among themselves, producing plants that look just like their parents. That's a species. Now, y'all, did you know that in the university system, 80% of college students, 20% of college students are auditory learners? You know what that means? You know what an auditory learner is? Maybe some of you are auditory learners. Words matter. Oh, you just love words, whether it's a spoken word, the written, like this slide here right now, 20% of you are like, oh, I love this. Right? 80% of you are like, no pictures? I don't understand these words. 80% of college students are visual learners. Okay, now you ready for the punchline? What percentage of college professors are auditory learners? 80%. And what percentage of college professors are visual learners? 20%. Okay, isn't it any wonder we have college students struggling in college when the professors are doing nothing but talking and not showing? What are these? Sneakers. That's what I used to call them when I was growing up. These were my sneakers. I had this real thing about sneakers. I'd like for you to pretend just for a second that sneakers are plants. And we're trying to apply the genus definition and the species definition to this group of sneakers, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the genus of Nike. Although each one of these sneakers represent groups that are uniquely different from each other, what do they all have in common? Similar reproductive units, which are the swoosh. Some of them are black, some of them are blue, some of them are reflective, some are red, but any plant that's in the genus Nike has a swoosh on it. Let me go back. Each one of these represents a group that are even more unique in that all their vegetative characteristics and the swoosh are all very, very similar to one another. So each one of these represents a separate what within the genus? Very good, separate species. Oh, look, the genus of New Balance. What's the reproductive unit of the New Balance sneaker? It's the end, right? And this represents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different species in the genus New Balance. Make sense? How did the Nike in there? Oh, a renegade species from the Nike genus filtered in. Thank you for seeing that. Let me introduce to you the species New Balance 574. What I love about New Balance is they number all their models. And so it makes it easier to identify the species. This is New Balance 574, the #1 New Balance selling sneaker in the world. A gray suede upper with a reflective end, a white cushion with a black sole. All right. New Balance 574, that's the sneaker. Okay, so I need a volunteer to be the CEO of New Balance. Who would like to be the CEO of New Balance? If no one volunteers, I'm going to just pick somebody.
Please.
Nate. Your name?
Done.
Donna. Okay, Donna, you're the CEO of New Balance, and I work for you. And I come to you and I say, hey, Donna, I took the New Balance 574 and I tweaked it a little bit. And I want to market this, but I got to ask you a question, Donna. I made it a black leather with a white end. Should we call it New Balance 574 or should we call it New Balance a different species, a different number? What do you think?
Donna number.
What? Give it a different number. Okay, so Donna, being in charge, made a decision. She said the differences in this sneaker are enough that it should be given a new species name. New Balance 585 or whatever. Okay. What's that?
But it already has 5.
Yeah, look at this. It says 574 on this. That's because when this happened in real life, it wasn't Donna, it was someone else. This is so important. That person, that CEO said, keep it 574. It's not different enough to designate a new species. So here's my point. Somebody made that decision based on their expertise as to whether or not a variation in the species is enough to create a new species or to keep it in the same species. Donna just decided she was going to make it a new species. And there's nothing wrong with that decision. But my point is, please understand that botanists for years and years and years have been choosing whether plants belong together or separate based on their own expertise, their own bias, all those things. Now what's happened? We can now genetically map plants. All of a sudden we can't argue anymore. Right? All right, so there's New Balance 574. Oh, look, there's New Balance 574. Oh, look, there's New Balance 574. Oh, look, there, I don't know why, but those are New Balance 574. Here's the Georgia Tech New Balance 574 and the NC State New Balance 574. All of these variants within the species are all the same species. Somebody's decision to do that. Hey, look at this, common species, red maple, silver maple, okay? Japanese maple. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4. All listed as Japanese maple. Let me do this. Let me put my finger right there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is New Balance 574. All of these are New Balance 574 variants. Some botanists said that's not different enough from that to create a new species. We're going to keep it in the same species, but we're going to identify it as a variation. So the take-home message to all these pictures is you can have significant variation within a species. What on earth are we going to do with that from a classification perspective? Anybody here a hockey fan? Okay. Toronto Maple Leafs. I sent an email to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I said, are you aware of the fact that not all Maple Leafs look like that? So I suggested they change the name of their team. Whoops, the Toronto double-winged Samaras. Because every single plant that's in the genus Maple produces double-winged Samaras. But not every plant that's in the genus Maple produces maple leaves or leaves that look like maple leaves. All right. I have heard nothing back from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, plant names. We're going to name plants. Now we have genus and species. All right. We haven't talked about how you classify the variants, but we will. Okay. But we got to talk about plant names just for a second. Plants typically have 2, sometimes 3 names, common names. Okay. Created by whom? Common people, right? Craneberry turned into cranberry and they didn't have to fill out a form, put it online, that type of thing. One name can be connected to many species and many names for one species. Y'all familiar with bluebells? 100 different species use the common name bluebell. Want to live life on the edge? Order bluebells, mail order. Do you see a problem here with the common naming system? First of all, there's no rules or regulations. You can name it anything you want. Today, we could come up with a new name for a familiar species if we wanted to. There's no form to fill out. There's nothing. Okay, that's bluebells. No, wait, that's bluebells. No, wait, that's bluebells. No, that's bluebells. Some of you are going, no, that's grape hyacinth. I know, that's bluebells. Nope, that's Ruellia. No, that's bluebells. Bluebells. So here back in the 1700s was this little boy, 8 years old. His neighborhood in Sweden called him the little botanist. He ran around looking at plants and he'd show people leaves and stems and flowers. Okay, he got his MD. He got to be a professor of medicine at a university in Sweden and got bored and ended up moving over into the botany department, became a professor of botany. And in the 1700s, Carl von Linné, there he is, and there I am next to his statue at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Carl von Linné is regarded as the father of taxonomic botany. The Swedish botanist is best known for creating a system to classify plants based on the number of reproductive parts. His system brought order to the scientific plant world. Linnaeus also helped establish a universal system for naming living organisms known as the binomial nomenclature. Each organism is named using 2 words. The first word, genus, combined with the second word, specific epithet, names that particular species. If it weren't for Linnaeus publishing that, we would not have a scientific naming system of plants. We've got a common name made by common people with no rules, and then we have a scientific naming system called the binomial that Linnaeus chose to create with lots of rules that are quote unquote enforced by the Code of International Botany. All right. So what is his binomial system? First thing Linnaeus did was he said, I got to pick a language. I got to pick a language that's going to be used by everybody. His whole vision was that everyone in the world would embrace the binomial system and use it, right? You're back in Switzerland. You're back in Geneva. You're on that committee. And this committee is trying to decide how to create a binomial system. And the chair of the committee, first thing they say is, what language should we use? And they point at you, the American.
Oh, English.
English, right? And the Brits go, here, here. They're okay with English, even though it's not the same as their language. Okay, Germans are shit. The French, they're like, right? China, they're like, wait a minute. Just for a fact, more people speak Chinese than any other language in the world. We think it should be Chinese. The Dutch are like, we teach all our college kids in English. We're okay with that. Okay. Somehow Linnaeus knew that people were going to be really ticked off if we chose somebody's national language. So he picked a language that is no one's national language. He picked Latin. But he also picked Latin. He also picked Latin because it's easy to create new Latin words. And he knew that there would be a need to create some new Latin words. So, and no one uses Latin as their national language, so we'll all be equally inconvenienced. The first part of the binomial, Linnaeus chose to choose the classification term genus as a way to, as a name to call it. He said it's going to be called the genus. And he said it's always going to be capitalized and underlined. Those are his rules, not mine. And he said that way, when you see a name like this, you'll know it is a genus, right? Always capitalized, underlined. Later, printing press, etc. It was like, oh yeah, by the way, you can also italicize it if you want. Okay, that was fine until now. How many different fonts do you have on your computer? How many of those fonts do you recognize italics clearly? I've gone back to using underline because you can't argue with an underline. All right, so here's Quercus equals oak. Acer equals maple. Metasequoia equals redwood. Some of you are scrunching your face now because you're saying, wait a minute, that's not the redwood that I saw in California. That's because it's not. There are about 3 or 4 different genera that use redwood as its common name. You see how confusing that could be, right? Metasequoia, only one genus, Metasequoia. Okay. Now, how many of these, I tell my students when I'm teaching this, say, okay, how many of these seemed obvious to you? And they're all like, it's like, how are you going to learn these? And they all go, memorization. Okay, you got to memorize these names. Quercus, Acer, Metasequoia. Okay. The second part of the binomial isn't called the species, which a lot of people think it should be called, but it's not. It's called the specific epithet. And the specific epithet is never capitalized and always underlined or in italics. Why the specific epithet? Here's why. Genus plus specific epithet equals species. A species always contains 2 names in it, not one. Okay. And if you don't put a genus in front of a specific epithet, then the specific epithet means nothing. Quercus alba. Quercus is the genus, alba is the specific epithet. What's the species? Don't say oak.
White oak.
Don't say white oak either. You're expelled from the class. No. What's the species?
Oh, alba.
Quercus alba is the species. Walk into a garden center and ask for alba. Hi, can I help you? Yes, I'm looking for alba. Alba has no meaning unless we put a quercus in front of it. Alba has no meaning unless we put cornus in front of it. You see, we can use more than one genus and designate a species by using the specific epithet of alba. That's why it can't be used all by itself. Make sense? Quercus alba, Quercus rubra, Quercus palustris. There's alba, there's rubra, there's palustris. Interestingly enough, these 3 species can be represented by the shapes of their vegetative organs. I could also show you their reproductive organs and they'd be uniquely different amongst those 3. So the name itself communicates. Now you say, well, Bryce, maybe there's a little bit that we don't have to memorize. Quercus means oak, alba. I know alba. Alba is a Latin word for white. Quercus alba, white oak. Quercus rubra, red oak. Quercus palustris, Okay. But maybe a little bit of help. Well, that makes sense. How are you going to pronounce these names? You can buy a book. Timber Press, Dictionary of Plant Names. When that book came out about 30 years ago, I got all excited to open it up because all my pronunciation were mimicking my college professor that taught plant ID. So I opened up the book. I went right to Quercus. Quercus, one for one. Then I went to Acer. In Latin, A's are pronounced C's are pronounced hard. So it's not Acer, it's Acer. I'm not doing that. I'm going to stick with Acer. Then I went to Ilex. I went to the holly genus, Ilex, right? I's are pronounced E. It's not Ilex, it's Elix. That sounds stupid. So I wasn't going to do that either. Then I went to Pinus. I's are pronounced E. We're not doing that.
To say nothing but fuchsia.
Absolutely. So here's our little object lesson. Here's Cercis canadensis. It's our native redbud. Cercis is the genus, canadensis is the specific epithet. Cercis canadensis is the species. Here's the tree, 20 to 25 feet, heart-shaped leaves and pink flowers. Who the heck picked redbud for the common name? Y'all look at me like, well, that's what it's called. Yeah, but what does redbud mean? It means the buds are red. Sorry. Okay. Cercis chinensis, the Asian cousin. Chinese redbud. Here it is. It's a smaller tree, multi-stem, still has those reddish, those pink flowers and smaller heart-shaped leaves. So what are the advantages of using a binomial system? I mean, I want you on the phone talking to somebody and saying, please embrace the binomial system and stop using common names because you're gonna spend more money using common names. You're gonna be more confused using common names, right? And they're gonna go prove it. What are the advantages? Well, we've been harping on one already. Avoids the confusion of common names. Completely eliminates the confusion of common names if you embrace the scientific name. Okay. So if I go to a garden center and I say, I'm looking for Kalmia latifolia, if that person doesn't know what that is, then that's a teachable moment. They're not going to say, I'm sorry, we don't carry it. If I walked in and said, hi, do you have mountain laurel? And they got 50 of them on sale, but they call them rhododendron. I'm in my car driving to another garden center because they don't have any. But if I say Kalmia latifolia, they're going to go, huh? And that's an open opportunity for a conversation. Or they're going to say, oh yeah, our Kalmia latifolia are right here behind the greenhouse and they're 50% off. Think about how much money could be saved by embracing it. But I'm convinced that only about 60% of you are, I'm embracing the binomial. Yes, I am. I'm all in. You're all in. Yes, you are. Okay. But I got two more advantages that are going to sell the rest of you. Here's the second one. International in use. Anybody going to Brussels this weekend? If you were, and you visited a botanical garden, and if they embrace the binomial system, you could, I'm the first American to marry into a German immigrant family. And when my wife and I got married, okay, we got married and a couple of relatives from the homeland came to the wedding, and they went back and reported to the rest of the family. And a message came within the first year of our marriage, bring us the American. They wanted to meet me. Right? So I found myself, right on my first anniversary, I found myself on a plane traveling international to visit my wife's family who spoke no English and I spoke no German. Right? So I found myself sitting in rooms with all kinds of relatives and hearing just, anybody here been language deprived? It's a horrible feeling, isn't it? Oh, it's horrible because you just sit there and there's da 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 da, and all of a sudden you da da da. Bryce. Going on. And so I say to my wife, what are they saying? She goes, I'll tell you later. Later never came. Later never came. So one day we're sitting in the room, da 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 da. Two of her cousins, biggest, tallest, meanest looking guys, stood up. I heard my name mentioned. They grabbed me by the arm, Auf Wiedersehen, and they started to take me away. I thought I had flunked the test. They put me in the backseat of their car, driving down the road. They're smirking, and I'm like, what are they going to do? Pull over. Guts. He gets out. He opens the back door. He shovels me out of the car. He looks at me and goes, 2 Uhr. And he put up this. So I thought, okay, 3 hours. He got back in the car, drove away. I can't read a road sign. I can't talk to another person. I'm standing there at the entrance at this university. It says something, something botanique. It's a botanical garden. I walk in, I walk up to my first plant, and I see Kalmia latifolia. Oh. Felt so good. Felt so good. Walked up to another one, Cercis canadensis. Yes! I came around the corner, there's a man on his knees weeding, a worker. He looks up at me and says, wie geht's? You know, typical American in a foreign land. Right? I tried to learn the language a little bit. And I said, hello, yeah. And then I thought, I gotta talk to this guy. And I said, Carrie, Illinois-ensis. He says, oh yeah. He jumps up, grabs me by the arm, takes me over to this tree. Carrie, Illinois-ensis. I said, yeah. He says, that's good. I said, yeah, that's good. I made a friend that day. I made a friend that day, all because of the binomial system. Now, this is silly to try to convince you to embrace the binomial system because someday you're going to be in a foreign country and you're going to want to look at plant labels. But the reality is, when you get on the websites that talk about plants, there's way more than 50% are international. And even though you can hit the translate button, Okay, if we didn't have the binomial system, you would know what that plant was based on its common name. Okay, now some of you may still not be convinced. So here's the third. The scientific name is descriptive and shows when plants are related. Related plants have similar environmental and cultural requirements, right? How many of you are a younger sibling? Did you ever experience this in school? You followed a sibling into a class that that sibling had with that instructor the year before or 2 years before. And they're calling roll and they get your name. Sandy Smith, and you go here, and they stop and they look and they go, "Are you Bobby Smith's little sister?" Yes. Okay. And then they respond one of two ways, and both ways are wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? One way is, "Well, we'll be expecting great things from you this year," right? Why? Why would the teacher say that? Because you share the same name, and that tells them you're related. And if you're related, then you're going to behave similarly. Right? That's not, you can't do that in humanity. It doesn't work that way. Just because you have a brother who shares the same name and maybe the same genetics doesn't mean that the two of you are going to respond the same way in everything. The other thing that teacher may do when they find out that you're Bobby's sister is, both are wrong. That's in humanity. In the plant kingdom, if we find out plants are related to each other by their scientific name, and we will, right? If we use the binomial system, we can assume they will have similar responses to the environment, etc. Here's case in point. I went to a garden center one day, I'm making it up, but I went to a garden center one day and I saw this tree at the garden center that had a label on it that said box elder. I'd never heard of box elder. I know not what it is, but it's this tree. And I decided I wanted it, so I bought it, brought it home. Now I have a box elder in my backyard and I'm trying to figure out where to plant it. I have no idea. I don't know anything about it. So I set it down, I go inside, I pick up that dictionary of plant names, I go to the common name index in the back, box elder, it says see page 21. I go to page 21, look what I see. I see this plant called Acer negundo. What do I know immediately about that plant? It's a maple, all right? Wait a minute, the leaves don't look anything like a maple leaf. Yes, hello Toronto Maple Leafs, okay? Right? But look what it produces for fruit. Double-winged samaras, which is what maples produce. So I know, it's a maple. Let's see, it's pretty fast growing. It'll grow in just about any kind of soil. So it's a little bit susceptible to cottony cushion scale. Whatever I might know about that group, I can infer there would be some similarities with that. So all of a sudden now, I know things about plants that I don't even know the plant yet, just by looking at the name. Seems to me it'd be a great way to incorporate that. I got till what, 12:30?
Yeah.
Okay, put on your seatbelts because we're gonna speed up here. What about New Balance 574? What about all those variations of New Balance 574? What do we do those? What do we do with those using this binomial system? Show you. There are situations that occur in plants in the same species where they vary from one another. But the variations are not enough to create a new species. Case in point, our redbud, Cercis canadensis. Okay, there's a variant that has white flowers, but you wouldn't ever know it unless it was flowering. So that's not different enough to create a new species. It's a variation within a species. Well, what do we call that? Well, first of all, variations can include things like size, dwarfness, habit, weeping, leaf color, variegation, or burgundy color, flower color. For every possible species, there's a variation that could occur in a species. Okay, they're endless and they're spontaneous. No matter how hard we scientists have been trying to figure out how to create variations in plants by irradiating them, the best variations come naturally. 1 in 50,000 of a species. Typically, you're going to get a variation. So after this lecture today, when you go home looking for a variant because you want to get rich, 1 in 50,000. Most of the time, homeowners are not finding variation. It's nurseries that are growing 50,000 plants in 5 years are typically finding those variants. Okay, so this is my great artwork here. You're on a walk in the springtime through the woods. You come across a grove of trees. Upon further looking, you see that these trees are quite familiar and that they have heart-shaped leaves. And they have pink flowers. It's Cercis canadensis, our redbud species. And you're so excited about it, but it doesn't intrigue you enough for you to stick around, so you start to walk away. And as you walk away, you notice that there's one lone tree in the right-hand side that has white flowers. Now that intrigues you. A chance seedling that has white flowers. So you put out a little blanket and you sit down and you watch this tree and it forms fruit and the fruit fall to the ground and you put a little crime scene tape around it so that you know where the kids are of that variant plant and you watch them germinate the next year and grow for the next 2 or 3 years and there they are. What color are the flowers? Ah, see, you can't agree.
Maybe one.
In this story, all of them are white.
Lucky you.
There it is. Doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. You have a variant plant, a chance seedling, that has a characteristic that's unique and different from the straight species, and that characteristic is inheritable and shows up in all the kids. So what kind of variation is that? What do botanists call that? It's called a botanical variety. It's called a botanical variety. A group of plants where, within a species, that do what? That display unique and inheritable characteristics. In the case of the story, it's the white, which always show up in all members of future generations. Y'all, for it to be a botanical variety, this has to happen. It's not a botanical variety if the kids have different colored flowers. In other words, that white variant comes true from seed. There's a horticultural term we use a lot, comes true from seed. All right, and that applies to varieties and it applies to species. Species come true from seed. Unique characteristics are that white flowering is self-perpetuating. You just sat there and ate your sandwich. You did not touch that plant or do anything to those kids. They came that way naturally. Make sense? Okay, so then the question is, how do we write the dang thing? Do we have to include Cercis canadensis in the name?
Yeah.
Have to, it's within the species, we have to include it. Okay, let's put it up there. There it is, Cercis canadensis. Then we have to add a clarifier. And in this case, the clarifier is called a varietal epithet. A varietal epithet. Oh, look, there's our friend Alba again. Okay, but in this case, it's not a specific epithet, it's a varietal epithet. Cercis canadensis alba. So Cercis is the genus, canadensis is the specific epithet, alba is the varietal epithet, Cercis canadensis is the species, Cercis canadensis alba is the botanical variety. So what do we call it? White red bud, white bud. We can just call it Charlie. We'll be fine. Remember, common names have no rules. In all the classes that I teach, I never grade common names. Because I've had students come up to me at the end of the hand and say, they come up and they say, I put that name there because I made up a new common name for that plant. That's on me, right? That's the way it should be. Common names are totally unreliable. Totally unreliable. Okay. Cercis canadensis alba, there's one way to write it. And then the botanists, bless their little hearts, they say, write it Cercis canadensis VAR alba. So I asked the botanist one day, why do we have to put the VAR in there? He said, because it's a variety. I said, yeah, but if you don't put it in there, how is this any different? Cercis canadensis alba. I said, alba's in the third position. What else could it be? They didn't like that. Okay, Bryce, to finish up, what about those variations that are not self-perpetuating? Cercis canadensis, straight species. Grove of straight species, pink flowers, chance seedling with blue flowers. What if that same grove had a chance seedling that had blue flowers, but those blue flowers did not yield children that have blue flowers? Oh no, right? We take a branch and we propagate it vegetatively. Redbuds only propagate by grafting. They don't propagate by cuttings. What do you call that group of blue flowering trees? Take a look, back to my diagram. There's the white flowering one over there. But just before you leave, you notice this one's blue flowering. But you wait and the children come up and they're pink. Rad. What isn't it? Not a true botanical variety. So what is it? It's a variant plant. Thank you very much. But you in your frustration cut some pieces of this, bring it home, treat it a certain way to make a little group of blue flowering plants. Now what is it?
Cultivated growth.
It's a cultivar, cultivated variety. So what's the difference between cultivars and varieties? This is so important. Humans are the difference, y'all. Okay, if a human doesn't perpetuate that variant, it's nothing. If the human perpetuates that variant in any way, shape, or form, it becomes something. It becomes a cultivar. Okay. Well, Bryce, what if it was able to produce its own seeds and the kids look just like it? Then it wouldn't be a cultivar, it would be a variety. Okay, now here's where it just gets a little bit confusing. Botanists call those botanical varieties, they call them botanical varieties. In horticulture, we just use the term variety, and it's describing the same thing as the botanical variety. But the problem with that is, in the gardening world, variety is used to describe cultivars. So you open up the Burpee seed catalog and it says new varieties of tomato. They're not varieties of tomato because they're all not self-perpetuating. They're all created by human beings. They're new cultivars of tomatoes. So I just want to make you aware of that. That's probably one of the most important things, to be able to listen to somebody you're talking to on the phone and understand whether they're actually talking about a botanical variety or whether they're talking about a cultivar when they say, I have this variety of. So you might have to dig a little bit deeper to get to the bottom of whether or not it's a cultivar or it's a botanical variety. We grow, gardeners, horticulture is filled with way more cultivars than varieties, commercially, all right? I maintain that most of the plants in our gardens, whether they be edible, aesthetic, ornament, whatever they might be, most of them are cultivars. So we best understand that. What is it? A group of notice the word cultivated shows up. Cultivate involves and implies humans. A group of cultivated plants where within a species, clearly distinguished by some characteristic, when reproduced by humans, always retains that characteristic. There's the key to the cultivar. Cercis canadensis. I'm showing you a cultivar called Cercis canadensis forest pansy. How do we write cultivar? Capitalize it, single quotes, and no underline. Botanical varieties not capitalized and underlined. Cultivars capitalized, not underlined, in single quotes. Now here's the cool, funny thing about cultivars. Do they have to be Latinized? No, but they can. Do they have to be one word? No, but they can. Do they have to be two words? No, but they can. Pieris japonica, flame of the forest, single quotes, the whole statement. Okay, it's interesting that the way that cultivars are cultivar epithet is created is at the whim of the creator. And call it whatever you want. Whatever you want, right? So forest pansy is the cultivar epithet. Cercis canadensis forest pansy is the whole thing. Okay. Here's one. There's Chinese holly, Ilex cornuta. That's what it looks like. If you've ever run into one of these, you remember, because it has 7 spines that will slice your skin. You'll end up with stitches. All right. So picture this. There's this nurseryman in Ohio, and he's got 50,000, and he grows all these Ilex cornuta. Not sure why. It's a shrub that grows about 10 feet tall. A lot of people use it as a barrier plant, keep people from, crossing through. Okay. It produces a few small red fruit, but it's not highly desirable. But he's got them. He's growing lots of them. And he's walking through his field, and on one shrub, he sees a branch growing out from the middle of that shrub that's mutated. It's mutated. What does it look like? Whoops. There it is. It looks like that. One spine, smooth margin, and it has lots of clusters of red fruit. He collects the fruit. There's no seeds inside. It's sterile. So what's he discovered? Nothing. He's just discovered a mutated branch. So it's up to him. This is so important. It's up to him to decide, to make a decision as to whether or not that mutation may have horticultural value. If he deems that it doesn't have value, nothing happens. If he thinks that it might have value, then he is open to propagate it to make more of the same, vegetatively, not sexually, but vegetatively. And so we'll propagate it. He gets to name it. The guy's name was Burford. He named it after himself and Latinized it, Ilex cornuta burfortii. the Burford holly. Whoops. The Burford holly. The nursery was in Akron, Ohio. He could have named it Ilex cornuta Akron. He could have named it after his dog, Ilex cornuta Fido. It's entirely up to him to what he calls it. Not only that, but you can patent it. You own the growing rights for 20 years if you get a patent, and you can sell the growing rights and get royalties. I struggle a little bit with patenting cultivars that are discovered and then developed by people. Because if I happen to just be walking down the street and I see that, versus a plant breeder who's doing some mad science to get that cultivar that's very unique, to me that, because if you think about the US Patent Office and what it was created for, it was created to protect and reward those people who have thought through an idea to create an invention. And yet within the Plant Patent Office, if I happen to discover a plant and discover a variant and propagate it and introduce it, then I can own the growing rights to that. What do you mean? So, Cercis canadensis, Cercis canadensis alba, Cercis canadensis forest pansy, certain Cercis canadensis hearts of gold, certain Cercis canadensis the rising sun. These are all examples of cultivars. All hybrids are not cultivars. That's my point. Just because it's a hybrid doesn't make it a cultivar unless it fulfills the rules that are written for cultivar. When propagated by humans, retains the characteristics and is not able to propagate itself and retain those characteristics, right? Good question, right? So there's forest pansy on the left, there's hearts of gold on the right, okay? Both of which were chance seedlings. Forest pansy was a chance seedling back in the 1940s at a nursery, and then was propagated, and we have this purple-leafed upright plant. Cultivar. Chance seedlings propagated by humans, that's one kind. The dogwood, the redbud example was that. 2, genetic mutations, Chinese holly example. And 3, plant breeders, mad scientists who create new plants that are not able to be in existence unless they created them. Most plants we grow in our gardens are cultivars. How's that sit with you?
It's kind of annoying, but.
Who said that? You said it's kind of annoying? Yeah, it can be until you put it on and wear it. So here's an example. Cercis canadensis texensis traveler. What have you just learned by looking at that name? You know nothing about the plant. What do you know now?
It's a variety.
It's a cultivar that came from a variety that came from a species. You see how much you can learn about a plant just by looking at its name and its name only? So my justification for embracing the binomial system is it makes me a better gardener. And it makes it easy for me to learn about the plants. Now, here's the backstory behind Cercis canadensis traveler. Okay, there was a Cercis canadensis, our typical native redbud, growing in Texas in a nursery. Okay, guy found a seedling where the leaves were more kidney shaped than heart shaped. They were real shiny, and that plant was real drought tolerant. And they came true from seed. What's he discovered? A new variety, a new botanical variety, named it Cercis canadensis texensis, the Texas group of redbuds, right? So the nurseryman starts growing these, and all of a sudden he sees one that's a ground cover. He goes, what the heck? The ground cover? Who would want that? He said, no one. But then he thought, wait a minute. What if I took pieces of that ground cover, texensis, and I varied it, and I grafted it onto a texensis straight species, or straight variety? What if I grafted on the top about chest high? Then I would get this. So this is a cultivar from a variety that came from a species. It is pretty cool. So the question that someone always asks at this time, which I just headed off at the past, was very simply, can you get a cultivar from a variety? The answer is yes. Okay. Can you get a variety from a cultivar? Answer is I'm not so sure you can. Okay. Typically, cultivars have been isolated as variants, mutations, or breeding results that are not able to reproduce at all. Or if they do reproduce, they don't reproduce anything that looks like them. You know, Japanese maples don't come true from seeds. So if you have a cultivar of Japanese maple in your backyard and you collect those seeds, okay, that's like going to Vegas. I plan, I do, I wanna see what I'm gonna get. Some of them might resemble their mom, but you're not gonna get any kind of uniform. The only way that maple's gonna be uniformly reproduced is if I graft it. Because then genetically, it's identical to the one I took it from.